Hey everybody, how you guys doing? Hello everyone, my name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. What's happening? See that we got a lot of viewers just right off the bat. Hey, right on. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. And this week's stream is going to be all about sovereign citizens. So I figure, we got kind of a cool thing going where we talk about various right-wing, right-wing groups and whatnot every week. And last week we did one talking about QAnon. So I think, the next step here is the sovereign citizen movement. There we go. Sorry, had to open up my ginger beer here. All right. Before we get started, let's take a look at where we're at so far. So we're drawing one of the deep ones here from Lovecraft, which if you've ever read Lovecraft, it's it's classic cosmic horror kind of stuff. The original stories from H.P. Lovecraft are actually somewhat racist. They are very much a product of their time, and H.P. Lovecraft was highly disturbingly racist person. But, they can be appreciated for what they are, and other authors have taken his ideas and created sort of much better stories than what he originally did, so. Right? So, you can separate the, maybe not so much celebrating Lovecraft himself, but the stories that he inspired and universes that he inspired and stuff, and the entire genre of weird cosmic horror owes a lot to him anyway. So anyhow, that's what we're drawing right here, and I think it's coming out pretty good. So this camera is like crooked. Let me just there we go. All right, well, welcome everybody, and let's go ahead and get the show on the road here. So, sovereign citizens. Why am I talking about sovereign citizens, right? Because they are somewhat fringe, and although the movement has been growing as always, as all frickin' right-wing movements seem to grow. Well, why am I mentioning it? Well, they were kind of in the news a little while ago. There was a conspiracy theory, kind of retouching on what we went over last week about Donald Trump and the inauguration, right? And what it was that this conspiracy theory that Donald Trump would be inaugurated on March 4th, right? So the January 21st inauguration came and went. Where all of the QAnon people were predicting that Trump would actually swoop in at the last, at 0 hour or whatever, and the storm would happen, and then, Biden and Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris and everybody would be arrested, and then Trump would become president again. That, of course, doesn't happen. So then, suddenly the date gets changed, and now it's, March 4th is the big day that the storm's going to be. And Donald Trump was going to be inaugurated as president on March 4th. And, of course, that didn't happen either. Now they're saying that, now it's been moved again. The goalposts have been moved again, and it's going to happen sometime in August, which, I'm pretty sure we all see where this is going, right? So why March 4th? Well, that comes from basically the sovereign citizen movement, right? And it comes from the idea that the United States is a corporation, right? And that, after the Civil War, right? I think it was the 14th Amendment is what turned the United States into a corporation. And every president since then has been president of the corporation of the United States of America and not the country of the United States of America. And this is why, according to them, Donald Trump was supposedly going to be re-inaugurated again, but this time as the 19th president of the nation, whereas before he was the 45th president of the corporation of America, right? So this kind of little bit of right-wing wackery comes from the sovereign citizen movement, right? So what exactly are sovereign citizens? Well, they are a never-ending bottomless pit of incredibly weird, wacky, and sometimes even hilarious right-wing buffoonery. Is a good way to describe sovereign citizens. Hey, Lewis the Hedgehog and Adversary Fandon, how you guys doing? Thanks for joining, guys. Yeah, a never-ending well of just clownish buffoonery. Right, is a good way to describe them. And so it's this belief that a human being, right, can't. That, well, it's this idea that okay, they claim that they have the ability to basically divorce themselves from the laws of the United States, right? And that there are two different kinds of citizens, according to sovereign citizens, right? There are the natural citizens, which everyone is by the, by the, I guess, by the fact that they're born. You're a natural citizen, like a natural citizen of the earth or whatever, right? And then there are what they call federal citizens, or sometimes they'll call these 14th Amendment citizens, right? And those are everybody else, all of us, the rest of us who are not sovereign citizens. They call us federal citizens, those citizens which are citizens of the corporation of the United States of America. Right. And, beholden to its laws or whatever. And the fact that they are natural citizens, that means that they're sovereign and they're not beholden to the laws of the United States. That's essentially what it comes down to, right? And so what it is that they believe that all laws are, all statutory laws, federal laws, right, are a matter of contract, right? Which is, a lot of this is very much based on misinterpretations of legal terms, things like that. Misunderstandings of the philosophy behind laws and, that kind of thing. So this is probably the biggest core belief, is that all laws are contracts, right? Or though sometimes they'll call them acts, so you'll see in their phony, documents and stuff like that, it'll say all laws or acts, something like that, right? And since all laws are contracts, if you don't enter into the contract, if you don't consent to it, essentially, then that means it doesn't apply to you, right? Which is, there are legal arguments sometimes where you can claim that, this law is unjust or whatever, and, I'm not going to follow this law because it's unjust. That actually is a valid legal defense. It never really works. But, for example, if there was a law that, said that, you had to allow someone to die or whatever. Like, there are laws, for example, out there, like, cities will try to pass laws saying that you're not allowed to feed homeless people, And there are activists that'll go out and purposely challenge those types of laws to, they'll go and do like free food things for homeless people in parks and stuff. And the defense that they'll do is say, hey, this law is unjust, it's immoral. I refuse to follow this law, right? I can't remember exactly what the term for that is. But that is actually a valid legal defense. It usually will not work, right? Usually if you try to disobey a law with that in mind, you're most likely going to be punished according to the law that you disobeyed, right? But protesters and things do actually take that defense sometimes, saying that the way the law is written is immoral and I'm not going to follow it, right? These guys kind of misunderstand that. They take that and they apply it to all laws, that have to do with like anything in the United States, basically, right? And it kind of revolves around this idea that you can, you can remove yourself from the jurisdiction of the state. You know, the state, or for purposes of this, you know, and because they also make distinctions between the federal laws and state laws and county laws, blah blah blah. But when I say the state here, I mean, you know, the country, right? Federal laws, right? And this idea is that that if you like file the right kind of paperwork, that kind of thing, then you can divorce yourself from being held under any laws, you know, from the state. And that includes things like, you know, having to pay parking tickets, or having to pay your mortgage, or having to pay back loans, or in particular, having to pay taxes. And we're going to find through this discussion that a lot of this shit has to do with, like, butthurt right-wingers coming up with very, very elaborate ways in which they can justify to themselves to not paying taxes. That's really what a lot of this stuff comes from, right? You know, instead of just like working to get the tax law changed, you know, if you don't like, you know, nobody likes taxes, right? If you think taxes are too high, then you should get politically active and try to elect people who will change the taxes. Change the laws for the taxes. It happens all the time. Republicans all the time get elected. They repeal taxes constantly, especially for rich people, right? But instead of going that route, these guys just kind of say, well, the law just doesn't apply to me because I'm not a citizen, right? So I'm not going to pay your income tax. Yeah, well, good luck with that. You know, that doesn't really work, like, ever, right? So these guys come in several different kinds of flavors, right? You know, there's not, you know, there's several different types of sovereign citizens. You have the kind of I'm not going to obey any law I don't like types. You know, these are the guys that'll drive around with you know, they'll have, say, for example, phony license plates, you know, that kind of thing. Like, they'll have a plate that says citizen of Montana or something, or citizen of Arizona, or Freeman, you know, free citizen of whatever. They'll have that on their license plate, or they'll have a license plate that says exempt, you know, that kind of thing, right? So you get those guys, right? Those are the ones that tend to, you know, join militia groups, stuff like that. You know, these are the kind of like, these are the guys that'll do things like they'll go occupy federal buildings and that kind of thing. And a lot of it has to do with tax protesting, right? In fact, a lot of this kind of grew out of tax protesting movements in the 70s and 80s. Then you get what's another flavor of sovereign citizen is what's called freeman on the land, right? Those are the guys who do things like, you know, try to file phony legal documents, things like that, claiming that, you know, they're not the same person that's listed on their birth certificate, you know, that the birth certificate is a legal fiction and that kind of thing. And they'll, you know, a lot of scam artists kind of glom onto that stuff too, and try to basically rip people off, thinking that if you file the right paperwork, then you'll be, you know, entitled to like millions of dollars. So we'll get to that. We'll get to more on that later. And there's other groups, you know, you'll also see, like, during this, is that a lot of these groups have ties to white supremacist groups, right? Tax protesters, white supremacist groups, fascist groups, things like that. Christian identity movements, that kind of thing. Although there is a growing number of non-white people who are starting to get into sovereign citizen type stuff too. You know, in Canada, apparently there's a group of like native, you know, native people of Canada who have started to adapt to these types of ideas. Most particular in the States, there's a group called the, what the hell are they called? I have it written down here. They are called the Moorish Temple Science of America. And they also kind of have some of these really wacky ideas. More on that a little later. right? In fact, we'll probably talk about them last. So there are, it's not exclusively just white people, but it is kind of, important to note that this is where the movement sort of grew out of. It grew out of that melting pot of right wing tax protesters, fascist groups and militia groups, racist groups, things like that. You know, that's where sovereign citizenship came from. And there is a very large overlap between all of these different groups. There's some sovereign citizens that believe, for example, that the United States Constitution and all of its protections only apply to white people, right? Because, all the subsequent amendments, the 14th Amendment, for example, which, basically freed the outlawed slavery, that kind of thing, like they say that doesn't apply. That applies to the corporation of the United States and not the country of the United States. And then that must mean that, you know, all subsequent civil rights legislation and stuff like that also only applies to the corporation and not, so it gets really bizarre, and there is a lot of crossover with racist groups, that kind of thing, right? So let's talk about the first type, the sort of semi-militant type of sovereign citizenship. These are the people that just basically use spurious readings of the law in order to just pick and choose which laws that they feel like following, right? Because one thing you'll notice that is, this movement is also not only in the United States. You see it in Canada, you see it in, England and Europe and stuff like that. And even though these people always claim that they're not subject to the laws of the state, they also have no problem taking advantage of programs that the state provides them. Things like healthcare, things like Social Security payments, that kind of thing. They got no problem taking the money, taking the healthcare. When you're in Canada, you have socialized medicine in Canada, right? They got no problem with that shit. And they only have a problem when it comes to actually paying the taxes that support these things. You're just like every other right winger out there, right? So let's see. So yeah, but mainly it's really just objecting to anything that they have to actually like contribute. Taxes. Any kind of licensing, including driver's licenses, hunting licenses, fishing licenses, things like that, business licenses, right? Any type of fees that they may have to pay for their businesses, that kind of thing, right? Basically, just anything that they, any kind of fee that you have to pay to the government, any kind of contribution to society. That is obligated. They feel that they're just not obligated to do any of that, but they are obligated. They are perfectly acceptable, taking advantage of all of the services and protections that those taxes and fees provide, right? So it seems like you see a big part of these people, right, coming out of rural areas, right? A lot of them tend to be farmers, for example. In fact, the guy that pretty much started, well, we'll get into that in a little bit. But a good example of, say, a sovereign citizen type, that's the first, type A, I guess we can call him, the somewhat militant type of sovereign citizen is Cliven Bundy. So I don't know if you guys remember who Cliven Bundy is, but he was the rancher in, let's see, hang on, I got it right here. So he was a rancher that, all right, actually, before we get into Cliven Bundy, I want to talk a little bit about Posse Comitatus, right? So Posse Comitatus was a tax, a right-wing tax protester type movement back in the 70s and 80s, right? And they were sort of like the precursors to sovereign citizens. Okay. they didn't recognize state governments, that kind of thing. And according to them, the highest form of legitimate government that there was is the county, right? And so they think that the county sheriff is the head of state. Okay? And this is why I brought up Cliven Bundy, because Cliven Bundy is an example of this type of sovereign citizen, right? You know, and these people are, they're very closely tied with militia movements. There's a lot of anti-Semitism going on, a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of racism. If you remember Cliven Bundy, he was the guy that, there was the Bundy Ranch standoff in 2014, right? Where what it was is that he, was letting his cows illegally graze on federal land. And because one day in 1993, he just decided, I'm just going to stop paying my grazing fees. Right. And that's it. He just decided, but he still wanted to put his cows on federal land. He just decided he's just not going to pay for it. Which is just like, like we said, they have no problem taking advantage of the services the governments provide. They just don't want to pay for them, right? So over the course of 20 years, Cliven Bundy gets into legal battles, and it goes back and forth, right? And he would use all of these ridiculous pseudo-legal arguments and things like that, claiming that the state of Arizona, or was it, was he in Arizona, or was he in, hang on a second, I have Cliven Bundy written down here. Where the hell is it? There we go. He's from Nevada is where he was. So basically claiming that the state of Nevada didn't have jurisdiction over him, that kind of thing, right? And this went on for years and years and years, right? And then finally, the state of, Arizona went and seized all his cattle, right? Because, guy was not paying his fucking fees, and over the course of 20 years, his his fees piled up to where eventually he owed the government over $1 million. And instead of doing the responsible thing, he just decided to go this wacky fucking route, saying that the law just doesn't apply to me, and so he just refused to pay it. So what happened is that they seize his cattle. He shows up with a group of armed protesters, somewhere around 1,000. Militia type guys, sovereign citizen militia type dudes show up with guns, right, to support Cliven Bundy. And there's this standoff that goes for, several weeks, right? And what it was that he basically would refuse to negotiate with anybody except the sheriff. Right? Because, the sheriff of Clark County, right? Because according to this wacky, this subsection of sovereign citizenship, the sheriff is the actual head of state. And apparently he actually demanded that the sheriff, he went and demanded that the sheriff go and disarm the federal officers that were they were having the standoff with, and deliver the guns to him, stuff like that. And he was disappointed when the sheriff didn't do this. Finally, after a little while, and I think it went for by the end of 2015, there it goes. By the end of 2015, the situation gets de-escalated, right? And Cliven Bundy just still didn't pay his fees, and got all his cows back, still just put him back on federal land, just, continued doing what he was doing, right? And essentially got away with it, And it was that was kind of a problem. The guy basically got away with it, right? Well, the state still went after his ass, but that was kind of fucked up. Then a few years later, in 2016, right, his son Ammon Bundy and another group of armed protesters went, and they occupied a National Wildlife Refuge building in Oregon, right? And this was the second big standoff relating to these guys, right? And what this was is that they were another group of sovereign citizen type guys, basically the same sort of thing, right? And they were doing this in support of these two ranchers named Dwight and Stephen Hammond, father and son ranchers, who were arrested for committing arson on federal land, right? And I can't remember exactly why they were committing arson, but I think they were burning garbage on federal land, which is illegal, right? You're not allowed to burn your garbage, and it was because they didn't want to pay to have it like properly taken care of, you know, which is what you're supposed to do when you're a rancher. You're supposed to pay somebody to come and haul off your refuse. And they didn't want to do that because that costs money. And so they decided, oh, we're just going to go and burn our shit on federal land and cause potentially cause a forest fire and shit like that. And they got arrested for it. And this apparently drove Cliven Bundy and his group of fucking sovereign citizen types over the edge, and they went and occupied this building in support of the two guys, right? So Stephen Hammond and Dwight Hammond, for their part, did not want this help. They actually made a public plea while this was happening that they didn't want their help and to go home. And I'm sure I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was for about a month. It was like in January of 2016, and it went until February of 2016. And I remember this, it was all over the news and stuff, and they were basically like uploading videos of themselves, right? That kind of thing. And what I remember is that the right wing really went easy on these guys. Like, I mean, not the right wing, the government, basically, the cops, really kind of treated these people with kid gloves. They were allowing, for example, packages to be sent to the building, right? Which blows me away. Now, keep in mind, these are people that went, occupied a federal building with weapons, kicked all the people out, kicked all the workers out, basically under the threat of their lives, right? And they claim that, yeah, it was all peaceful. Well, it's not peaceful when you show up with a fucking rifle, right, and say, get out, and if you don't get out, I'm gonna fucking blow you away. That's not a peaceful protest. That is not a peaceful protest. That is a violent protest. Even if you don't actually shoot anybody, the fact that you're armed to the fucking teeth and are threatening to kill someone, that's violent, right? So, and they basically sat up there for a month, right, getting mail from people sending them care packages and shit like that, making YouTube videos asking people to send them food and snacks and Doritos and that kind of thing. And it was funny, I remember this specifically because I remember people were trolling them. Like, somebody sent them a whole box filled with fucking dildos. That shit was hilarious. Right? I remember watching that video. Like, they opened this box and it's filled with sex toys. That was fucking the funniest shit ever. So as all this is going on, right, their father, Cliven Bundy, who himself is a wanted man for his own standoff less than a year before, is going on TV. He was on Fox News, he was on talk shows, shit like that, and he's like, speaking out in support of his sons and their fucking illegal terrorist occupation of a federal building. Imagine if if BLM, Black Lives Matter, which is funny because the building they occupied was from the Bureau of Land Management, so their acronym is actually BLM. Right? A little bit of historical irony there, but imagine if Black Lives Matter took over with guns, showed up with guns and took over a federal building and kicked everybody out and said, this is our building now, right? How long do you think that shit would last? I don't even think it would last 24 hours. If they came with weapons, do you really think it would last that long? The cops, the Fed, the FBI, they let this shit go for a month. Right. For a month. And people were coming and going, and they weren't even arresting them as they left. People would leave and go do media appearances and then come back. And the FBI was allowing them back into the fucking building. It was ridiculous. And I guess, okay, the idea was like, all right, well, we don't want to escalate. We don't want this to turn into like another, Waco or some shit like that. You know, that's fine. But, you know, if they leave the fucking building, arrest them, for crying out loud, right? I don't understand it. It's like, you know, when the government, the cops, they really do treat right-wingers in this country with kid gloves. Right? Perfect fucking example of this. So anyway, so this goes on for a little while, right? Cliven Bundy himself eventually gets arrested. They finally arrest his ass when he flies in to go join his sons at this occupation. They finally decide to fucking arrest him. Some shit that they should have done years before, right? And then the standoff at the BLM building, Bureau of Land Management building, gets resolved. Eventually people start turning themselves in, stuff like that, you know. And one guy ends up getting killed because he draws his pistol on, the cops, and they shoot him, right? There's still lots and lots of videos of these people up on YouTube. You can find them on YouTube and places like LiveLeak and stuff like that, of these right-wingers at this occupation, and how they're, debating amongst themselves. And if you ever need, if you're ever bored on a Sunday afternoon and you need something to take up a few hours, look some of these videos up, because they're hilariously disturbing. One conspiracy theory after another. There's one that I remember about a woman who was there, who was like, everybody, they're all talking in this parking lot, and there's a woman freaking out saying, we need to take cover. A drone strike may hit us at any moment. You guys don't understand, shit like that. I mean, just paranoid delusion, right-wing insanity, banana sandwiches insanity. It would be hilarious if it wasn't real. If it was just some shit that you saw in a movie, you'd be laughing your ass off. But it's real shit. People actually believe this stuff, and that's what makes it disturbing and sad, and a bad harbinger for what the future of the human race has in hold. Right? Anyway, so that shit finally gets resolved. They finally all get captured, right? And the stuff goes to trial, and Cliven Bundy and his sons use all the usual sovereign citizen ridiculousness to stall the trial. One trick they'll do is that, according to sovereign citizens, right, your birth certificate is in fact a legal entity. And it's because your name is printed in capital letters on your birth certificate. So that is, in fact, a legal fiction, according to them, right? And so often, what they'll do is that when they go to court, and the court will, like, ask them, is this person in the room or whatever, or are you, say, John Smith or whatever, right? And what they'll do is they'll present their birth certificate, and they'll try to claim that the birth certificate is in fact John Smith. This is John Smith. And then they'll say to themselves, my name is John of the family Smith, or some shit like that. Right? In order to distinguish themselves, themselves being the natural person from their legal fiction. Which is complete bullshit. That's not how it works. And you gotta remember, none of this shit ever fucking works. Okay? These are these weird, like, pseudo-legal defenses that they take, like, have no basis in fucking reality. And more often than not, these people end up just making shit worse for themselves when they try to pull it, But anyway, so Cliven Bundy and his family and stuff, they all tried these same tricks, They all claimed that the law doesn't apply to them, and they're not citizens of whatever, and they're really citizens of Arizona, and blah, 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 blah. And, and what ended up happening is that what happened is that the BLM organization, the Bureau of Land Management, didn't turn over, and the FBI apparently didn't turn over documents that would aid in the defense during the discovery phase. So when you go to trial, they have what's called the discovery phase, where the prosecution has to turn over everything they've got, any kind of, like, documentation and stuff. Right. And they apparently forgot to turn over some documents, and the judge declared it a mistrial. So Cliven Bundy got off scot-free. His sons got off scot-free. And he didn't have to pay any of his legal fees for the last 20 years. Didn't have to pay any of that. His sons didn't get held accountable for taking over a fucking building, and getting somebody killed, and the tons and tons of money that they cost the Bureau of Land Management and all of that shit, terrorism, all that. They didn't get held accountable for any of that. They got off scot-free, which is complete and total bullshit. Right? And then, if it's a mistrial, they can go to file it again and go through it again and do it the right way. And the appeals just kind of, there was an appeal to do that, and that got denied, and that's it. Cliven Bundy's a free man, which is, if that isn't proof that the government goes easy on right-wingers, then what the fuck is? Because if you can imagine for a nanosecond, if this was a left-wing group, if this was, say, for example, Black Lives Matter or something like that, or say the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters or some other, left-wing group, and this same shit happens, guaranteed that that appeal would have gone through, and that trial would have started all over again. Right? But no, since they're right-wingers and they have guns and they're afraid of another fucking Ruby Ridge happening, they get off scot-fucking-free. And then what happens is that people see this shit, the sovereign citizens see how this ended up, and they think it's because of their fucking horseshit, ridiculous, like, pseudo Konami code legal shit is what actually got these guys off. And then that just emboldens these assholes to go off and do this shit even more, So that's what's really fucked up here. But anyway, so he's kind of Cliven Bundy is probably the best known example of the first type, the posse comitatus type of sovereign citizen, right? They basically just go for the law doesn't apply to us route. Right? And it seems like a lot of them are actually farmers and stuff like that, Posse Comitatus itself, which was the forebearer, was a kind of an anti-tax movement, and it was actually started way back in, probably around late 70s, right? And the main founder of the Posse Comitatus was a guy named Henry Lamont Beach. And this guy was a character. He was part of what's called the Silver Legion of America, right? And so the Silver Legion of America was a pro-fascist group in the 1940s, right? And so before World War II, right, before Pearl Harbor, right, there were a large number of pro-fascist groups in the United States that were like essentially mainstream, and this was one of them, but there were a lot of them, there was the Friends of New Germany, there was one called the Christian Party, there was, god damn it, fucking cars driving around outside. See, if I wasn't streaming, there would be no cars out there, and you wouldn't hear all this loud ass noises and anything. Let me close the window. Hang on a second. Make your shit any louder, why don't you? God damn. Okay, well, that doesn't really cut down on the noise that much, but whatever. Anyway, there was a large number of these groups. There was one called the, America First Party, which is actually the current incarnation of the America First is not that far away from them. That's kind of funny. America First is that group, the pro-Trump group or whatever. That's kind of where they got their name from. They got their name from this pro-fascist, pro-Axis group from the 1940s, right? So anyway, that was the Silver Legion was one of those, right? And apparently, they were based off of Mussolini's black shirts. Same kind of thing. They wore silver with an L over the breast. These silver shirts and ties and stuff like that. And it was a kind of a uniform, And at one point they claimed to have 15,000 members, but they probably really didn't have that many. The reason why is because the leader of the Silver Shirts ran for president in 1936, and he got all of 1,600 votes. So maybe they didn't have that many, or maybe fascists don't like voting. I don't know. Back in the 30s, maybe they didn't like voting. But anyhow, the leader of the Silver Shirts was a guy named William Dudley Pelley, and he essentially wanted to be Hitler. That's what he wanted in America. He wanted to, basically he ran for president. He wanted to be called the chief, the same way that Hitler was the Führer, or what was Mussolini called, El Duce or whatever. I don't know. I can't speak Italian. And they were a very anti-Semitic, racist kind of group, basically neo-Nazis and shit. And there was evidence that not neo-Nazis, but actual Nazi agents were in support of these guys and would supply them with funding and stuff like that. And then after Pearl Harbor, they all kind of dissolved. And then cops started arresting them and that kind of thing. So it's like, they got what they deserved. So anyway, this guy, their leader, William Dudley Pelley, basically ended up in jail by 1942. So, yeah, he disappeared. He, but anyway, that's kind of where the founder of Posse Comitatus, has some nice, actual Nazi cred behind him. Another founder of Posse Comitatus was a guy named James Wickstorm, who was a radical preacher who preached what they call serpent seed doctrine. So, if you haven't heard of that, the serpent seed doctrine is this idea that in the Garden of Eden, the serpent mated with Eve and gave birth to Cain, so that Cain was actually not a son of Adam, right, but is actually a son of Satan, right? And then, of course, Cain goes on, and, that's why they basically say that modern Jewish people are descendants of Cain. So, according to the serpent doctrine, Jewish people are literally the spawn of Satan. That's another guy who was an early Posse Comitatus, adopter there. So, and then one more guy, just to round out our colorful cast of characters for the Posse Comitatus, is a guy named William Potter Gale, who was associated with the Aryan Nations and the Church of Jesus Christ Christian and the militia movement. And so this guy, Gale, I guess we'll call him William Potter Gale, founded another group in the 50s called the California Rangers that were basically a precursor to the militia groups that you would see in the 70s and 80s, right? They were like a tax protesting group in the 50s and 60s, but essentially a paramilitary tax protesting group, right? And he was very much involved in Christian identity. There was another group that he founded called the Christian Patriot Movement, or rather, he was part of that, what's called the Christian Patriot Movement in the 80s, right? And that's like that sort of Christian identity kind of idea that only Christians are American citizens, like only Christians are real citizens, and the Constitution only applies to Christians. Those kind of guys, they were actually kind of really big for a little while during the Bush years. They've kind of died down a little bit. Like, all of these groups have sort of been integrated into the alt-right nowadays, But you'll still see, the occasional nod back to groups like this from alt-right figures. They'll mention shit like this, And, so There was one guy on YouTube that his name was Shock of God. I don't know if you've ever watched like way back maybe about 10 years ago on YouTube when the atheism debate was a big thing. There was a guy named Shock of God. He was very much into the Christian patriot movement. This idea that, only Christians were American citizens and the Constitution only applied to Christians and it didn't apply to Muslims and it didn't apply to atheists, shit like that. So these ideas sound crazy, don't they? But there are people even today that still believe this shit. It's like ideas never die, no matter how bad they are, right? They can only be fought against. The only way to fight against bad ideas is to fight them with good ideas. And this is why it's important to know about this stuff. It's important to know about your enemy and what they actually believe because, when somebody like that says, when they talk about Christians and they talk about laws and that kind of thing, they're not actually talking like you're not speaking the same language with them. They're referring to different things than you are. It's important to know these things. Anyway, so that's that's the Posse Comitatus movement, very much grounded in white supremacism, in Christian identity, in fucking fascism, right? This is where the sovereign citizen movement came from, and it's like, it's kind of there's a big overlap in between all of these beliefs. So Cliven Bundy himself may not be an actual Nazi, but the guy was racist as hell. There's interviews of him, for example, saying things like black people were better off under slavery, right? That kind of thing. Normal sovereign citizens may not be, fascists, right? But a hell of a lot of them seem to be. There seems to be a very big overlap. And I think this is something that, because you're starting to see these ideas latch on with black people, with Native Americans, things like that. And I think this is one way that, we should really communicate this to these people. It's like, hey, the shit that you believe, this is where it came from, So maybe you should, re-examine it, right? Maybe you should re-examine these ideas, depending, seeing where their fucking source was, right? So, that's maybe one method of deprogramming some of these people. Even white people, too. Even white people who don't know the racist history of sovereign citizens. Maybe we can deprogram them by, kind of explaining some of that shit, right? Anyway. So, yeah, that's basically... Are we already at... What? Damn, we've been talking for almost an hour. Jesus Christ. It's funny how fast this shit goes when you actually have things to talk about. I thought I was going too fast, but then I look at the time and it's like, fuck, running out of time. Anyway, so that was the first, that's one flavor of sovereign citizens, right? There's another flavor, another sort of movement that can be called sovereign citizens, right? These are the free man on the land types. Okay, free man on the land is what they call that. And this is also tied into what's called the redemption movement. Okay, so free man on the land is... They kind of believe the same sort of things. They believe that, you're not subject to the government, that you can, you can renounce your citizenship, that kind of thing, in order to not be under the jurisdiction of federal laws. They believe all the same thing about, 14th Amendment citizens and the corporation of the United States of America, that kind of thing. The main difference seems to be that the Freeman on the land movement likes to try to use phony pseudo-legal arguments in order to manipulate the law in such a way that they can get away with anything. Right? That seems to be their number one thing. The idea that they have this idea that if they just file the right paperwork or whatever, like the law is sort of like a magic code. You know what I mean? Like filing paper, like if you file the right type of paperwork or whatever, then you don't have to pay taxes ever again in your entire life. That kind of thing. And they treat it like it's magic, basically, And so these are the guys that, like, if you go into a courtroom, like, they'll say shit like, okay, well, the flag in this courtroom has a fringe on it. And so that means that this court is actually a court of maritime law and not normal law. Right? Or stuff like that. Or they'll say things like, okay, well, you know, I am not this person. So like the you know, a cop will ask them their name, and they'll say shit like, you know, is this your name? And he'll say, that's not my name. And, you know, is your name John Smith? No, my name is not John Smith. My name is John of the family Smith, and I'm a free blah, 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 blah. And, or else they'll say something like, you know, yeah, shit like that, right? So they believe in all these sort of weird pseudo-legal, you know, doctrines, right? Which usually come from misinterpreting normal law. And then some of it will, like, they'll cite things like the Magna Carta, right? You know, shit that is not binding law in the United States. They'll cite the Commercial Uniform Code, you know, that kind of thing, the Magna Carta. They'll cite fucking treaties, foreign treaties from like 500 years ago that have nothing to do with like the United States or the Constitution whatsoever. That kind of thing. They'll pull up all of this random bullshit in order to justify their views, you know, on this stuff. And the funny thing is that these people, Freeman on the Land, will often try to pull these arguments in actual courts of law, which is not a good idea, you know. It's not a good idea to play around in a courtroom because that has consequences, and not just pissing off the judge, but you will lose, and it will get worse for you. You know, that if you try to pull shit like this in an actual courtroom for something that you're in trouble for, something like that, it's just going to make stuff worse. And you're going to end up paying more money, you know, if it's a fine. You're going to end up going to jail longer if it's like a criminal case, rather than if you just use normal, ordinary legal defenses like every other person, right? This stuff will not work. And occasionally you'll see like YouTube videos or articles or something where someone will claim that it worked and I got off scot-free. No, it didn't. That just means that there was a judgment in your favor for some other reason. That's usually why, you know. Like, yeah, and they'll do this stuff. It's hilarious. If you ever get a chance to watch any of this, there's a ton of this on YouTube also, you know, of Freeman on the Land types, you know, sovereign citizen types in courtrooms making these spurious arguments. Like, for example, one thing that they'll do is that they'll say if the judge ever gets up and leaves the bench, then that means all you have to do is say, you have to just say out loud, man overboard, right? And then as he leaves, then you can make the judgment yourself. Like, seriously, there's videos of this on YouTube where the judge gets up, leaves the bench, the fucking defendant or whatever, then starts like screaming, man overboard, man overboard. And then the judge leaves the room, and then the defendant, like, you know, the sovereign citizen dude will like then claim to make the judgment himself in his favor, and then he'll just leave the room. He'll just leave the courtroom, right? And it's like, you know, shit like that. This wacky, ridiculous shit that will get you thrown in jail, right? So that's one thing, right? There is also a large, I guess, segment of this which relates to scam artists, right? And what it is that, well, before we get into that, okay, let's talk a little bit about, you know, because this kind of leads into it, all right? So, this Freeman on the Land stuff, right, was basically founded by a guy in the late 90s or so. You know, the guy that came up with this, his name was Roger Elvick, and he was, lo and behold, a white supremacist. Right? White supremacist sack of fucking human garbage named Roger Elvick, right? Who was also a rancher. It's funny how, like, all of these things seem to come from cattle ranchers, from farmers, shit like that. Anyway, so this guy, you know, loses his farm in a bad business deal and that kind of thing. Ends up going to jail in 1991 for tax fraud, right? So he didn't like paying taxes. Gets out of jail, in the late 90s, and he's come up with this theory, these theories, right? Supposedly from his own legal research. Okay. And in around the late 90s, 96, 97, he starts giving seminars on this stuff, right? And he's come up with this idea, like, we're talking about the birth certificate representing you as a fictitious legal identity, right? Like, your birth certificate is a fictitious legal entity. He's the guy that basically came up with this, right? And what it is that he sort of he created this notion, right, that the 14th Amendment created, since the 14th Amendment created the Corporation of the United States, right, then that means that the federal, the United States is using its citizens to mortgage its currency, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So basically saying, like, how money is backed by nothing. Like, there used to be the gold standard, and then they took that away, and essentially money is created out of thin air. Money is worth whatever we say it's worth nowadays, and there really is, because that's how paper money kind of began. It kind of began as a banknote that you could take to a bank and redeem for, like, say you'd have a $10 bill and it would say redeemable and $10 worth of silver or something. And then, this is like back in the in the 19th century and shit. You could take your $10 bill and go to a bank and then actually get $10 worth of silver. Like, that's how paper money kind of began, right? It was backed by precious metals, They got rid of the gold standard, back in the 30s, I think, or something like that. I can't remember exactly when, but they get rid of the gold standard, and money today is backed by nothing. It's backed by the good faith and credit of the United States, whatever the fuck that means, right? And that's, worked out pretty well so far. So this guy, Roger Elvick, claims that when they did that, they instead they're backing their money. The United States is backing its money with its citizens, right? And they sold its citizens, because it's a corporation, and we're all citizens of the corporation, right? That means we're owned by the corporation, and we are in fact the citizens ourselves, property, and we are being used to back our money, right? And what's happening, according to him, is that the federal government, for each person that's born, they give you a birth certificate, right? That birth certificate has your name in caps, so that means your name, in caps there, that's your legal fictitious entity that's supposed to be you, right? And then the Federal Reserve will open a bank account for each person. And this bank account supposedly has $630,000 in it. And I don't know why that number is exactly $630,000. Maybe that's what this guy, Roger Elvick, needed to get out of debt. Who knows? Right? But that's what he claims. And the claim is that if you just know the right paperwork and the right legal jargon, and you could file the right legal briefs or whatever, then you'll be able to access the $630,000, right? And then you can use it to pay off debts. You can use it to, pay off your house and shit like that, and buy boats and cars and blah, 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 blah. And that's the idea, right? And it begins by, the way you got to do it is that you have to begin by engaging in what's called a legal rebellion, right? Which there is no such thing as legal rebellion, because if you're rebelling, it's not legal, That's kind of the whole point of rebelling against something, is to, claim that it's illegal, right? So, anyway, the way that they claim legal rebellion is by filing some, like, horseshit paperwork. It's called, I got it written down here, a notice of understanding and intent to claim of right. Right, so I want to kind of show you guys what this looks like. Okay, let me just turn on my monitor here. And in fact, I'll put this down in the, let me copy this. I'll put this down in the chat. Oh wow, a lot of questions. Okay, I will get to you guys, I will get to your comments at the end of this as always. So this is the thing I'm looking at right now. Right, and let me turn on my monitor. This is a notice of intent, understanding, and claim of right. Okay. By somebody named Mike Clark. Or Mike, you know, so here's the thing. This is actually one from England, right? You can kind of see how this is written, you know. It's something that looks like it should be a legal document, but it really doesn't make any sense at all, you know. So the way it's written, if you see how his name is written, Mike Clark, Mike Colin Clark, right? That idea, the idea behind that is what they're trying to do is that they're trying to make themselves distinct from the name on their birth certificate, right? So that's why they write it. They'll either say, you know, Mike of the family Clark, or Mike Colin Clark, or something like that, or Mike of something like that, you know. Mike of Mike citizen of fucking Nevada or whatever, shit like that, right? That's how they'll write it. And the theory behind that, the reason why they write their name like this, and the reason why it's in red ink as well, it's supposedly red ink, you know, it's a red font, red ink is supposed to have some kind of legal significance. You know, green ink is also supposed to have some kind of legal significance too, right? But the reason why they write their name like that is so because according to them, the government is you know, since you have to consent before a law can apply to you, then the government is always trying to get you to, you know, trick you into consenting, right? And they call that a joinder, right? So if you actually write your name the same way it appears on a birth certificate, or if you answer to that, then that's a joiner, and the government has then tricked you into you know, signing on to the contract, right? The government has then tricked you into giving your consent for that law. Now that law applies to you, right? So that's why they write their name all weird like that, you know, which this, of course, has no basis in fucking reality either. An actual joinder in legal terms is just when, like, you know, groups of lawsuits are basically joined together, right? Has nothing to fucking do with this whatsoever, you know. So anyway, so you can see the way that he writes all this stuff, you know, whereas it is my understanding that in blah, 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 there is no species more supreme than a living, breathing, imaginative, blessed living soul. So this basically is the, you know, the clause that says that natural law supersedes, you know, supersedes fucking, statutory law or whatever. And it's basically horseshit, you know, but it's interesting to read because it sounds like, if you read through this, it sounds like something that, if you were, like, say, a teenager and somebody asked you to write a legal document, this is the kind of language you would use. You know what I mean? Like, it's like something that, like, someone who's not a lawyer would write because it sounds like it's official. That's what it is. And it's complete bullshit. So it's also kind of hilarious because people will take shit like this. And what this is they'll take this notice of intent, understanding, claim of right, and then they'll file it with their county clerk, right? Because once again, you know, the county is the highest, only legitimate form of actual government, right? And they'll file it with their county clerk, and then they'll claim that since they filed this notice of intent, then that means that they are no longer subject to any laws of the United States whatsoever. And then that's when they go about just, like, you know, doing whatever the fuck they want, you know, not paying their car registration, not getting a driver's license, not paying any taxes for anything, not paying any fees for anything, shit like that, you know, using federal land however the fuck they want, right? Not paying their mortgages. That's another thing. People use this as a way to try to get out of their mortgages that they can't afford anymore, because they say, well, that was a contract entered in with this you know, let me turn this off. They'll say shit like, this contract, this debt that I got, you know, it was this mortgage that I got. It was a contract that was undertaken with this legal fiction, which is not me. So really, my birth certificate, the actual physical piece of paper, is the one that owes you the $200,000 for this mortgage and not me. Shit like that. People, they'll do that kind of thing. They'll try to get out of paying for car loans with it, you know. And then what? There's another thing which they'll do. They'll do what's called a fee schedule, right? And I don't have an example of that, unfortunately. But what it is, it's a list of fees that they'll charge people if anybody, you know, infringes upon their natural rights. So, and it'll be shit like this. Like, if a cop comes and arrests them and takes them to jail, then they'll say, my fee for going to jail is, you know, $500,000 a day. Right? And, you know, and then they'll file this too, and they'll say, well, since I filed this with the county clerk, that means it's legally binding. And that way, you know, so if I get arrested for these 27 unpaid parking tickets and I go to prison, then, you know, you guys owe me 500 grand every single day that I'm in jail, which is bullshit. And then they'll send bills to people. They'll send bills to the state, to the police department, and even to just normal, ordinary people. Somebody like trespasses on their land or whatever, you know, encyclopedia salesman shows up and knocks on their door or something like that, and they'll say, you trespassed on my land, you now owe me $27 million or something, and then they'll try to like collect on that shit. You know, it's delusional, and of course this shit never works. No one's gonna even pay that, you know, because it's complete pseudo-legal horseshit that has no basis in fucking reality, you know, but this is what these people do, right? It's ridiculous, right? Anyway, let's see. So, anyway, getting back to, the scam part of it, because there's a big portion of this, which is basically like, you know, scam artists will use this stuff in order to try to convince people that they can collect on these straw man bank accounts, is what they are, right? And so people will file all this paperwork and stuff like that. And then they'll think that, you know, because I guess you can just go and drop these things off, and, you know, they'll think that since I filled out this paperwork, since I sent it in to the, you know, this, like basically they'll go to like a website or something, and then they'll get like, you know, all of these pseudo-legal, you know, forms and things. And sometimes they'll be mixed in with real forms, like you'll get a 1099. You know, which is like interest on 1099 is interest on a home loan, and they'll fill that out. But then, you know, the site says that it's for something else, that kind of thing, right? And they'll file all this stuff with the Internal Revenue Service and the Treasury Department, and then they'll think that since they did this, that means that now they have access to their super secret strawman bank account with $630,000 in it. And what they'll start doing is that they'll start writing checks against it, you know, buying shit like boats and cars and paying off bills and that kind of thing. And then they'll send bills back, you know, saying things on it like you know, not applicable or whatever, right? You know, or else they'll like try to pay their bills with this fictitious fucking bank account, that kind of thing. And then they get into all kinds of legal trouble, because now that's like fraud. You know, it's actually like starting to reach into fraud territory when you're passing bad checks. You know, that money's got to come from somewhere, and you're claiming it's coming from a bank account that doesn't fucking exist based on some shit you read on a website, and that you paid some moron fucking $1,500 for a packet of phony baloney, you know, legal horseshit fucking pseudo-legal documents that don't make any fucking sense and have no basis in fucking reality. Well, who's going to end up footing the bill? It's going to be you, right? So now you have, like, you know, thousands of people clogging up the legal system with these, like, frivolous horseshit, you know, because they tried to pay their fucking bills with this, like, fictitious fucking, you know, bank account that doesn't exist, right? In the meantime, like, the fucking guy giving the scam, you know, the scam artist who sold them all of this shit is laughing all the way to the fucking bank. you know. So this is kind of, this is what it gets scary. Like people get hurt because of this kind of thing, right? You know. Um, Anyway, so yeah, that's some scary shit, man. Right? You'll see sometimes these people, like, you'll see it on websites. If you ever encounter a site like this, it'll say something like acceptance for value. So AV4 is, like if you ever see like a site that says we can help you get rid of your tax bills or whatever, and it starts talking about acceptance for value, that's a scam. Or another one is Treasury direct accounts. That is also a scam. These are things to look out for. And you got to watch out because the thing is they prey on desperate people. That's what it is. Okay. They go to, because there are people out there that, especially nowadays, we just had, 10 years ago we had a fucking financial meltdown. And then now last year we just had, the COVID meltdown, right? Where millions of people lost their jobs over this last year, right? Millions more people are like, about to lose their homes, right? If something doesn't get done here pretty soon, millions of more people are going to get evicted. They're going to lose their homes. They're going to be out on the street. We're going to have a major fucking homeless problem here, and not that long from now. Shit is going to really hit the fan in this country, and there's a lot of very desperate people out there, and when people are desperate, you know and they see something like this where it's like, hey, fucking, they see something like this where it's like, hey, these people can save us. Maybe all we got to do is file this paperwork and shit like that, and we'll be okay. That can be attractive to lots of people. Desperate people do desperate things, right? And it's just going to end up it's going to end up hurting more and more people. That's the really sad thing about it. So, pretty, I don't know. It's just kind of nobody wins in these situations here. And then the best thing you can do is try to educate your friends and your loved ones, especially your parents, so that they don't fall into this kind of thing. And, hopefully everything will be all right, Anyway, so that's kind of sad. There is one more group of people I want to talk about. Because, a lot of this stuff really started with white supremacists. It started with racist groups, fascist groups, and they definitely have ties to it. Although the sovereign citizen movement has somewhat moved beyond that in some respects, right? But still, it could very, it does have roots in white supremacism. But there are groups of people that are starting to adopt these sorts of sovereign citizen type arguments who are not white supremacists, who are not, in fact, not even white. And one group that is worth mentioning, they're called the, I had them written down here. In fact, we talked about them a few minutes ago. They're called the Moorish Temple Science of America, right? And these guys are definitely kind of strange. They're a religious sect. I wouldn't call them a cult because cults are usually somewhat small, and these guys actually have been around for a little while, roughly 100 years or so. And, so they're sort of a sect of Islam, right, who believe in strange things. I mean, I'm essentially an atheist, so I don't really believe in any religion myself, so, but, you believe whatever you believe, so what's up with the Moorish Temple Science? Well, they believe that all black people in America, African Americans, are in fact descendants of the Moabites, and are in fact called Moors. That's why they should be called Moors, right? And according to these people, the Moabites were the occupants of North Africa, and northwestern and northeastern Africa, right? In real life, though, Moab was a kingdom in the ancient Levant. It was one of the neighbors to Israel, right? And then the word Moor was actually something that was given by Christian Europeans in the Middle Ages to refer to Islamic refer to Islamic, people of Islamic faith that lived in Europe at that time. That lived in Spain and in Sicily and that kind of thing. Because after right around there was the you had Muslim invasions of Europe, due to the Crusades and that kind of thing. And there was actually kind of a rich cultural history of Muslims in Southern Europe around that time, But around then, this is when you had the Crusades and you had this sort of clash of civilizations and stuff like that. And so these people that inhabited those areas were called the Moors. So that name Moors is actually something that, white Christians gave to the black inhabitants of Southern Europe there. So not exactly as empowering as you would think, but then again, I don't know. I don't, who am I to judge? I'm essentially an atheist. Anyway, so, yeah, so, that's all fine. You can believe whatever you want. That's cool, But how do these people factor in with sovereign citizens? Well, so there's a group of Moorish Science Temple adherents who are taking the teachings of the Moorish Science Temple and kind of perverting them to criminal ends, right? And what they're doing is that they're going around and to people and claiming that, they'll go up to someone who just recently bought a house, right? Or a house that has been put on the market or something like that. And they'll claim that they own the land that the house is on, right? And that the keys should be surrendered to them and that they're going to move in. And it's essentially a scam, and the idea is that, well, they believe that the Moors, since they're descendants of the Moabites who are the Moors, right? And the Moors were the people that discovered America before Columbus and even before the Indians, according to some people, or even before the Native Americans, according to some of these people, right? They say that the Moors were here first in the North American continent, which is not true, but anyway. So according to that means that all of the land in the Western Hemisphere, in fact, belongs to the Moors, right? Belongs to them specifically. Okay? So this is the claim. And because because their ancestors discovered the North American continent, then that means all of the land in the Western Hemisphere belongs to them, right? So that means this house belongs to them. So you should surrender your keys to it, right? And what they'll do is they'll go and they'll find a house that has just recently been sold, or one that has a dispute as to who the owner is, something like that, like the title is under dispute, and they'll file a phony lien on it, saying that we actually belong, this actually belongs to us, and it's like, that kind of thing. They'll file phony paperwork, right? Fake deeds, they'll file property claims claiming that they own this. And it's basically a scam. It's a scam. It's like high, a scam of essentially a form of squatting, where you just kind of steal somebody's house from underneath them, right? And they'll use this, and they'll use, like, say, local, tenant laws to their advantage. Like, once they get in there, then, if somebody's stupid enough to actually allow them to move in, right, then they'll use tenant laws to just basically fucking stay in there as long as possible, And usually the shit'll never really work out for them, but there's been some cases where, like, SWAT teams have had to show up and basically evict these people because they won't fucking leave. Like, once they get in there, they won't leave. And it's like, this is why you buy title insurance, by the way. If you ever buy a house, you have to get title insurance. Because sometimes you can buy houses without title insurance, but the reason you get title insurance is so that if there's a, question about who actually owns the title to the house, then they take it up with the insurance company, and this kind of shit doesn't happen. And then you don't get, like, the, county sheriffs showing up at your house evicting you from your own fucking house that you paid for, So, so the Moorish Science Temple Science, I guess, of America, the organization, for their part, has disavowed these people. So I don't want to give that impression, right? The actual organization is not supporting these people at all. They're saying that they're taking their beliefs and are perverting it to their own ends, right? Which is, yeah, good for them. I mean, that's their, you know, I would be really offended by that too if somebody was taking my religious beliefs and using it to scam people, you know. So, but yeah, it's basically the same kind of. They're using the same sort of pseudo legal arguments. These arguments that, well, since we're not citizens of the United States and we were here first and all this other shit, and that means the laws of the United States don't apply to us, and that means we can just jack your house whenever we feel like it. And it's just a kind of another form of sovereign citizenship. And, a form where it's like the ideas have evolved and other people are taking these ideas that originally were there to support white supremacism, and it's showing that like black people and non-whites, other non-whites are taking these ideas and using them to support their own ideas, which, are all bullshit in the end. So, kind of goes to show you, bullshit comes in all colors, folks, right? And these are things that you got to watch out for. So, anyway, so that's pretty much all my prepared material. Sovereign citizens in general are very, be careful of these people. They're dangerous. These people are dangerous. There's been something around, according to this source here that I have, I'll put it down in the bottom. There's a study about criminality and sovereign citizens right there. I'm not going to open that, but it's called A Narrative Review with Implications of Violence Towards Law Enforcement for Sovereign Citizens. It talks about how there's been something around 75 instances in the last 40 years or so of sovereign citizens assaulting police officers. 27 of those resulted in police officers being killed, right? That kind of thing. So it's like, these people tend to also always be armed. Sovereign citizens very much support the Second Amendment, which is funny because it's like, the law, the Constitution doesn't apply to them, but except I guess the Second Amendment fucking applies to them, right? So these people will often always be armed. You'll see weird signs on their property, shit like that, and be careful if you ever deal with these people because they'll fucking kill you. That's one thing. Right? Because it's easy to justify it when you think the law of the land doesn't apply to you. So, something to be aware of. And, they have kind of stayed in the fringes for the last, 30 years or so. They've always kind of been off in that fringe. And you could see the ideas bleeding through now and then. And I think QAnon, the idea that QAnon is starting to adapt some of these ideas makes it more disturbing, in my opinion. It's like that means like the far radical fringe is, because QAnon, you got to remember, QAnon has millions and millions of followers who are starting to spread out all around the world, and that means potentially these incredibly dangerous and sometimes ideas that result in murder sometimes, right? These can spread around the entire fucking earth now because some asshole is gonna like recycle it under the guise of QAnon. Saying like a Q drop dropping. Somebody making a Q drop saying that fucking laws don't apply to you anymore, so just go out and shoot Democrats or whatever. That could very much happen. These people when they radicals of all stripes tend to run together. So it's no surprise that the fringe movements attract other members of other fringe movements. So anyway, where are we at? 124. I gotta take a break. My hand hurts. Let's read some of your comments, guys. What do we got here? Let's see. Big discussion going on today. Let's see. Mass Effect is like a cross between Lovecraft and Blade Runner. Yes it is. Kind of science fiction, cosmic horror. That's definitely true. Adversary Fandon, I think Kent Hovind is a sovereign citizen or something similar. Yeah, Kent Hovind is, he has expressed similar ideas to these. Kent Hovind's a creationist, for you guys out in the audience, if, you don't know who he is. He was very famous in recent years for debating evolution, stuff like that. And then I think he went to prison for something. I can't remember exactly what it was. He went to prison for some reason. I don't know. It was kind of strange. It's funny how, like, God, what the fuck did, now I got to look that up. What did Kent Hovind go to jail for? It was like, was it like child molestation or something? Let me see. Kent Hovind. Yeah, now I gotta, was it for not paying his taxes? Let's see, political activity. Here we go. Federal civil tax legal problems. Yeah, okay. So he went to jail for tax fraud, tax evasion. Right. And renouncing citizenship. Yeah, okay. I guess he actually was kind of into this stuff. I did not know that. Dang. That would have been good to know before this video. So I'll have to look that up. Yeah, I guess there's another link right there, another example of right-wing religious wackos, adapting these sort of pseudo-legal and borderline white supremacist ideas into their philosophy. Right. Guess that Venn diagram is very much more circular than we thought. Thanks for bringing that up, man. Okay, what else we got here? Traveling, not driving. Yes, yeah, okay. Lewis the Hedgehog, it sounds like the whole us versus them mentality. Yeah, I mean, it kind of always is when it comes to right-wingers of all stripes. Conservatives in general are very much not empathetic towards anyone. Right, until something happens to them, and until something happens to them personally, they generally don't really give a shit about people. So that's why you see Meghan McCain, for example, from what's that fucking TV show with Whoopi Goldberg on it. Meghan McCain is in favor of parental leave, and it's because she just had a baby recently, and now she understands that people should be allowed to spend time bonding with their newly born child and shit like that. And before she had a baby, she didn't really give a shit about parental leave. Perfect example. Another one is Dick Cheney is in favor of gay rights. He's in favor of gay marriage, and it's because his daughter is a lesbian. His daughter is gay, and before his daughter came out as gay, Dick Cheney was very much anti-gay rights. He would sign on to pledges and things, like saying that we'll never support gay marriage and all this other stuff, and, family values, blah, 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 blah. Suddenly someone in his family that he cares about comes out as gay, and then all of a sudden he's supporting all the gay rights shit. Another perfect fucking example of how they don't really care about anything or anyone, only care about themselves. So yeah, it's a very much a, sovereign citizens in general, it's very much an expression of that. This idea that I'm not going to do anything at all to help society whatsoever. So much so that even laws that got passed, I'm not going to obey these other laws that everybody else has to obey, I mean, that's the thing, is that, because it's not, morally wrong to stand up to what you think are unjust laws. That's not morally wrong at all. You know what I mean? But it's this idea that first off, they only really seem to give a shit about taxes. This is all just elaborate bullshit in order for them to justify getting out of paying taxes for themselves, right? And God, sorry, my legs are all crampy. Sitting down for too long. And it's because they don't want to support society. They don't believe that taxes actually support society. That in order to, build the society we have, right, it requires government spending. You also get a lot of overlaps between these people and objectivists. and like those sort of like people, those taxes are theft kind of people, right? Those kind of guys, like fucking, what do they call those assholes? Are anarcho-capitalists or whatever. Those fucking people, they all kind of mesh together. The people that think like taxes are thievery and all this other crap. You know, they all kind of they share a lot of ideas in common here. You know, this idea that if we didn't have a government and they would just all be like private businesses and stuff, would be able to take care of all of the needs of society, which in real life that never happens. There's never been an example of that happening. And if left up to private businesses, we'd all be fucking like, I don't know, we'd all be slaves at this point probably. Anyway, let's see. Scott Billingham, hey, how you doing? I do not recognize you. Thank you for joining, man. It's always good to see a new name. Scott Billingham, the seedy people don't just ignore unjust laws, they claim the laws must be changed. Soviets don't care if laws are changed, they will ignore the new ones as well. Yeah, exactly. They say the law must be changed, and then so then you change the law, and then they just don't obey that one. It's like they just basically just pick and choose whatever laws they feel like obeying at any given time. Please keep in mind, if for example, they loaned money to somebody, and then somebody tried to use any of these arguments to get out of paying the money that they fucking they're owed, I'm pretty sure they'd be using every legitimate legal trick in the book to get their money back. Right? So it's like, it's not the law that they object to, it's the fact that they have to pay some shit that they don't want to pay, basically. They just don't want to obey the fucking law because they don't want to pay the money, and they're justifying it to themselves. This is what all this shit is. It's just all like an elaborate justification so that they don't feel bad about breaking the law, so that they can bullshit themselves into thinking that, the law is actually unjust. It's like, it's not fucking unjust. What, to pay taxes? Get the fuck out of here. Anyway. Moving on. Cody Course. When only white people could use welfare, white people never bitched as much about paying taxes, but when everyone else could get it, now they don't want to pay taxes anymore. That's extremely true. I agree with that 100%. In fact, you'll even see that if you ever, for example, see an interview with leading white supremacist people like Jared Taylor, for example. They'll say that exact same thing. They'll say, yeah, we don't mind paying taxes as long as it goes to the people we want it to pay, want it to go to. And that's one of the reasons why they object to paying taxes, is because it goes to minorities, for example, So that's definitely true, Of course, I think rather that even in their perfect world, even if, say, for example, somebody like Jared Taylor did manage to somehow start an ethnic state in the Pacific Northwest or whatever, I think he'd still object to paying taxes. Even if it was going to white people, but, still, that justification doesn't somehow make it fucking better. He's still a piece of shit. in my opinion. Let's see. Hand is starting to hurt here, guys. Let's go on a little bit here. Scott Billiam. Portland police departments had to install revolving doors, arresting Antifa are released so quickly. Oh, I actually did see a video about that. About how, what was it like? Something like 98% of all of the protesters, the BLM and the Antifa protesters that were arrested this summer were released with no charges, which makes you think, why were they arrested in the first place if they're just going to release them? And it's pretty obvious it's because it's a tactic in order to squash free speech. That's what it is. So in order to scare people, and because you're less likely to go to a protest if you think you're going to spend the weekend in jail, right? If you think you're going to go to prison for whatever reason, And, maybe you think, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong, but who fucking knows? And plus, maybe you can't afford a lawyer, you know what I mean? Like, so if you had those fears, if you think like, hey, if I go to this protest, I could end up in prison, maybe you won't go. You know, that's very much a tactic in order to suppress these types of movements, in order to suppress, you know, especially movements from left wingers. Things like BLM, things like Occupy Wall Street, shit like that. Because whenever right wingers go out and protest, they never fucking like bring their hammer down and arrest tons of those fucking people, even when it does turn violent. Look at the capital city fucking riot. You know, as that was happening, hundreds and thousands of people surrounding this building, trashing shit, breaking in, shit like that. The day of that riot, it was like there was like 25 people got arrested. That was it. It was seriously like, of course, over the course of the last 3 months, they've gone through the security videos and things like that, and they've made over 200 arrests. A lot of those are in the news, so I don't want to say that they didn't follow up. But while the shit was happening, no, they didn't crack down very hard on that at all. They let those fucking people do whatever the fuck they want. There's videos of those guys, like, straight up opening barricades and shit, letting those people walk inside the goddamn buildings. If you think for a minute, like, if those people were Black Lives Matter, if they were Antifa, something like that, you think they would have stood out of the way and just let them walk through the barricades? Hell no. Hell no. In fact, they probably would have had a tank in front of that place. Right? They probably would have had a tank. They probably would have had fucking drones flying around. They would have had, like, an entire line of cops with, like, riot shields and shit all lined up. Shotguns armed with fucking sandbags in them and rubber bullets, that kind of thing. Tear gas everywhere. That's exactly what had fucking happened. But it's right wingers. They're Trump supporters. So, only like 15 cops show up and they just let them walk in. And the ones that don't let them walk in get, beat to death outside with a flagpole. Anyway, did you hear about that, by the way? Kind of taking a side note here, because I was thinking of making a video about this, actually. So that particular police officer who died during the Capital City riot, his name was Brian Shechnick, I think. They have determined that he died of natural causes, if you can believe that. They said that he died of a stroke, right? Because what it was is that, this guy was assaulted. He was sprayed in the face with, like, bear spray, and he was the person that originally they thought he was hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, and that turned out not to be true. But there still is reports that he was actually physically assaulted, beaten, right? Punched in the face, shit like that. And then 8 hours later, after all this happens, he dies of a stroke. And what it was 2 strokes. Apparently a blood clot got lodged in his spine, and this guy dies. So the right wing in this country, right? If you go on Reddit, stuff like that, go to Art Conservative. There's another one called another subreddit called Actual Public Freakouts. That's another one. After that news dropped, they were all over that, saying, see, it was all fake news. They claimed that this guy was beaten by a fire extinguisher, blah, 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 and that he was murdered and he actually died of natural causes. It's like, yeah, okay. He died of natural causes in the same way that if you beat the shit out of somebody and then they die of a heart attack, that's natural causes. All right? Please, the stroke was brought on by the fucking assault. Okay? Don't, because what are you expecting us to believe? You're expecting us to believe that this guy gets his ass kicked, he gets sprayed in the face with bear mace, shit like that, and then 8 hours later just, randomly dies of a fucking... So that means if he wasn't assaulted, he would have, still would have died of a stroke? Is that what you're expecting me to fucking believe? Get the fuck out of my face with that bullshit, right? It's like that same kind of, but this is the excuse that they're all bringing up, that the right wing, rank and file is bringing up about this guy. And they're using it to try to claim that January 6th fucking, insurrection was peaceful. That's what they're trying to do, The same way, it reminds me a lot of, actually, speaking of, George Floyd. It reminds me a lot of how they all claimed George Floyd died of a heart attack because of a fentanyl overdose. As if the fucking gorilla fucking cop sitting on his neck for 9 minutes had nothing to do with it. It's such bullshit. So anyway, I was gonna make a video about that, but then the the George Floyd Derek Chauvin thing happened, and I was like, well, fuck, that's kind of, everybody and their mom is making a video about this on YouTube, so what do I really have to contribute to the conversation? I mean, that's another thing. I don't really, if I see videos and people say it better than me, it's like, why should I say it too? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's why I'll never be a super successful YouTuber, because I'm not putting out videos about every single subject ever. Maybe I should start doing that, but, I don't know. It would be nice to actually, like, do YouTube as a living. I mean, that'd be like a dream come true, but I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. If that's what it takes, like, that's really what it takes, is you have to make a video every fucking day, and I really do not have the time to make videos every single day about everything, and a lot of the times, just subjects that come up, I don't really have much of an opinion, and the things that I would say, I see other videos, and people say, they say it better than me, and it's like, well, how can I add anything to this conversation? I don't know. Maybe I should. Maybe I should practice actually having opinion about everything. Let's see. What else we got here? Do I have any? I got a little bit left here. A few more. We still got a few minutes left. Let's see. The View. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog. The View is the name of that show that Megan McCain is on. Scott Billiam, let's see, Light Tajiri Bay has a YouTube channel. She teaches all kinds of sub-shit craziness marinated in Islam. I will check it out. Thanks for the heads up. Moorish Temple Science are not sub-chits, but there are splinter groups that are sub-chits. Yeah, so that's exactly, like, for their part, the actual organization of the Moorish Temple Science have disavowed these people. And call them out as criminals, and I get it. I get the impression just from watching videos and stuff that some of them are kind of pissed off that this is happening because it's making them look bad. So there you go. But it just kind of shows how any belief can be twisted around. You know what I mean? And ultimately, it's like that's what a religion is. A religion is a set of beliefs that cannot be proven. And when they're beliefs, when they're things that cannot be verified and that cannot be proven, people are going to use them for their own ends. And that's the truth, People use the Bible for its own ends, and they use the Quran for their own ends, and they use, the fucking Buddhist sutras and things like that for their own ends to justify whatever vile, disgusting thing they want to do. Everything from slavery to murder to war and genocide has always been justified by religions in one way or another, right? So I guess that's a sign that your religion made it. When someone's using it to scam people or using it to hurt people, that's a sign that you're no longer a cult. You're an actual bona fide religion. So there you go. I guess if we start seeing genocides committed in the name of Scientology, we'll have to stop calling them a cult. Right. What else we got here? Scott Billiam, seems like Cheney's view of gay marriage evolved the same as Obama's, who knew Obama was a far right-winger. Yeah, Obama was a lot more conservative than people gave him, I think what it was is that people sort of projected what they wanted Obama to be onto him, right? Because if you think about it, during the, during his presidential campaign in 2008, right? Obama didn't really take a strong stance on a lot of things. Not really. He took the usual safe kind of route that normal Democrats have, but people kept kind of saying like he's for all of these things. He's for getting rid of student debt, and he's for gay marriage, and he's for like all this progressive shit. He's for universal health care and all of this stuff that he never expressed any actual like positions for. Especially like universal health care. Obama never said he was in favor of universal health care. like ever, the whole time. Right? You know, his whole thing was like a public option or whatever, but people projected that onto him, you know? People projected that onto him because that was what he represented. He represented hope to people, you know? I mean, you think, because Obama, if you remember, he came after who was up to that point the worst president of all time, you know, George W. Bush, who got us into two different wars at the same time, who basically flushed our fucking economy down the toilet in a serious way. You know, the Bush presidency was a nightmare from start to finish, you know, which we thought was the worst it could ever get. But then, lo and behold, Trump comes along, right? But in some respects, you know, in some respects, Bush was even worse than Trump. I mean, Trump didn't start any new wars, for example. You know, he definitely fucking you know, Trump did more to ruin people's lives for sure, and to fuck up the country, and to you know, throwing children in cages, shit like that. You know, getting rid of you know, setting discourse back in this country back a generation, and then, you know, finally ruining the economy through his incredibly terrible, awful, you know, incompetent handling of the pandemic. So don't get me wrong, Trump did all of that bad shit, but he didn't invade Iraq, right? You know, so Bush actually cost more human lives than Donald Trump did. Donald Trump maybe fucked up the infrastructure of the country more than George W. Bush, but George W. Bush directly, you know, his presidency directly resulted in more loss of human life. So, which one of those is worse? You know, one with a higher body count, or the one that, you know, fundamentally destroys the country for generations to come? Like, I don't know which one of those is worse. But anyway, you know, Obama came right after that. He came right after this disaster of a fucking presidency. He inherited two wars at once that were still going at that time with no end in sight, which is still mostly have not fucking ended. You know, we still have troops in Afghanistan, still have a base in fucking Iraq. This shit's still going on. I mean, it's been 20 years for crying out loud. You know, Obama also inherited the financial meltdown, which was, you know, the largest financial meltdown in, you know, 70 years up to that point. And the only solution that he can come up with was just to fucking throw money at it. Quantitative easing. Throw money at it, you know. What they should have done is they should have thrown money at the fucking populace. You know, that's what they should have done. You know, they paid something like, you know, X number of $1 trillion to the banks and shit like that so they wouldn't go under, right? They didn't give any money to the homeowners, the people losing their money, you know, people losing their houses and their jobs and shit like that. They didn't give any money to us, no stimulus. We didn't get any stimulus checks during the Obama era. We should have. We should have got stimulus checks during that era. That probably would have saved some people's houses, right? Saved some people's jobs, but no, didn't do that. We actually, you know, Obama undertook the conservative, you know, ideas when it came to austerity, shit like that. You know, he even made some of the Bush tax cuts permanent, for crying out fucking loud. You know, and don't get me wrong, it's not like, you know, the Republicans didn't make that shit easy for him. You know, we had all of these obstruction. They basically obstructed every single fucking thing he tried to do. They, you know, they used spending as a cudgel in order to beat him over the head with it constantly. Things like the fiscal cliff and the sequester and all that shit. So don't get me wrong, you know, the Republicans are not blameless in any of that. They definitely contributed immensely to, you know, the failures of the Obama presidency, right? But for his part, Barack Obama could have done way more. And I think, you know, I actually am kind of looking at what's going on with Biden right now. I mean, he's obviously not the best president ever either. But he seems to have learned that lesson. He seems to have learned that you can't play nice with the Decepticons, right? He seems to have learned that. He seems to have learned that if I ever want to pass any shit at all, if I want to be seen as a good president and be successful, then I just have to like do my shit without input from Republicans. He seems to have gotten that through his, you know, finally, hopefully the fucking Democrats will learn that fucking lesson finally. And maybe we might actually get to see some things like student, you know, debt relief. We might actually get to see stuff like that, you know. So who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe Biden will fail at this too. I mean, it's only been 3 months. Let's give the guy a chance. Right. Anyway, let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog. Oh, actually, wait. Let's go up a little bit. Cody Course. Too many conservatives are terrified that in our country is about to turn into Zimbabwe, where you have to pay $100 trillion to buy an apple. Hyperinflation. Could that happen here? I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. It could very well happen. I think what it would take is so you got to remember, all of that stuff is kind of like I guess when the good faith and credit of the United States disappears, then that's when we'll see hyperinflation, right? And currently, right now, the United States government is still has a AAA rating. That was actually something else that happened during the Bush years. Is that the United States lost their AAA rating for a little while. What does that mean? That means that when they issue bonds, when the United States when a government borrows money, they issue bonds, right? And up until that point, a AAA rating means that 100% those bonds will be paid, and you'll get your investment back, right? And during the Bush era, for a little while, the United States government lost its AAA rating, and that caused a little bit of financial chaos too. And we've gotten it back since then, but that's basically that's one sign that if, for example, a credit agency like Standard and Poor's or something rated the United States at just an A rating instead of a AAA rating, that's one sign that shit is about to seriously hit the fan. You'll start seeing inflation, shit like that. If they raise interest rates too much, it's kind of, it's very complicated. It's like, on one hand, keeping interest rates low means that people can borrow money and not have to pay it back very much. But then if you borrow too much money, then you get into too much debt and blah, 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 blah. And it's very, and I'm not going to try to claim that I understand the system, the financial system in the United States, because, I have very much a layman's understanding about certain things. I understand certain things, and other things I don't understand. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that would happen. I don't think that we're going to see hyperinflation here because, you also got to remember that the currency in the United States is kind of the fiat currency for the world. A lot of countries kind of use, they either tie their currency to the United States dollar or something like that. In recent years, like the euro is starting to overtake that a little bit, but then that kind of slowed down some, and that's another sign, like when you start seeing other countries base their money off of euros and not dollars, like, for example, oil is priced in dollars, If oil was suddenly priced in euros, then that's another sign that shit's about to hit the fan in the United States. So there are signals that you can look out for. If you're really worried about that, if you're worried about hyperinflation, then you should do things like there are things you can invest in which are hedges against that. Things like cryptocurrency, investing in heavy metals, that kind of thing. I wouldn't say put all of your money into cryptocurrency or heavy metals and gold, but it's a good idea to have a little bit. I actually have, some myself, not too much. I mean, I'm not super rich, but I've got, a couple $1,000s here and there. I'm not like super duper rich. I can say that of all the things I've invested in, cryptocurrency has given me the greatest return. Like even more than like the stock market, even more than anything else. Like, I've seen the highest return on cryptocurrency. So that's probably where I'm going to put the most of my, because it just seems to be performing way better than even the stock market, for crying out loud. It's like, stock market you can only really make money at the stock market if you have a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like if you have like, $10, $20, $30,000 to invest, something like that. And then you can pay attention to it and buy it when it's low and sell it when it's high, shit like that. Then you can make money in the stock market. But if you just have like a few $1,000, you ain't gonna make shit. Okay? Seriously, if you just have like normal person money, like, to play with like a normal person money that you can lose and not break the bank with, you're not going to make shit in the stock market. Like, seriously, buy Bitcoin with that. You'll make way more over time than you will trying to like buy fucking GME stock or something. Right? So, anyway. Okay. My hand is killing me, guys. Let's see. Couple more questions here. Lewis the Hedgehog. Could being beaten cause a stroke? I've heard of clots breaking loose internally and then killing a person. Yes. Yes, they could. And I just think, that's the idea that the fact that this guy was beaten and then died 8 hours later, that one doesn't have something to do with the other. I just don't buy that. That if some alternate universe, if this guy didn't get in a fight and didn't get, his ass beat and sprayed in the face, that he just would have died of natural causes 8 hours later. I don't believe that for a nanosecond. So, pretty sure. I guess the official medical examiner said that they weren't related, but I'm highly suspicious of that. And you gotta remember, the guy's he's just the opinion of one person. So, I don't know. It could be true, but I highly doubt that. Let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog. Bush also racked up the debt to then high levels, but Trump almost started a war with Iran. Yeah. See, if you look at that point, I think that's another thing that Bush really did wrong, is that when in 2000 there was a projected surplus, right? Projected surplus of $500 billion per year. So whether or not that actually would have been a surplus or not is debatable, right? But that's what he had coming in. He had coming in a national debt of $5 trillion with a projected surplus of $500 billion, right? So what do you do if you have debt and then you have more money coming in than you're budgeted for? You use the money that you're getting to pay off the debt. That's what you fucking do, okay? That's what anybody would do. But no, George W. Bush didn't do that because he's a Republican, so he cuts taxes, right? And then he gets us into two wars after he cuts the taxes, right? So not only does he spend $1 trillion on this tax cut, right? He spends another fucking like $2, $3, $4 trillion on two wars at the same time, right? So by the time he leaves office, right, by the time Bush leaves office, he's doubled that. So it was $5 trillion. He leaves, it's fucking $10 trillion. Okay? And now, every single time there's a president, the national debt gets doubled. So Obama comes in, it's roughly $10 trillion. He leaves, it was around 19 trillion by the time he left, right? And that is, and the thing is, when Obama left office, the actual deficit spending was on its way down. Okay? It was still deficit spending, but it was lower. It went way up because of the financial crisis, and then it started going down and going down and going down. And if it would have continued to go down at the rate that it was at, it probably would be gone by now. But then, so what happens when Trump comes in, gets another gigantic fucking tax cut? Shit goes way back up, and now what are we at now? What's the national debt at now? Fucking 27 trillion, some shit like that. It's ridiculous. It's, and so that's another thing to remember is whenever Republicans talk about spending, the truth is they don't really give a shit about spending, because every time they're in office, the only thing they do is cut taxes, Trump had the entire government for 2 years, right? He had the presidency, he had the Supreme Court, he had both houses of Congress for his first 2 years. He could have done anything he wanted. He could have got anything passed he wanted. The only thing they did was a tax cut. They didn't do anything else, right? They didn't fucking do anything about healthcare. That was one of the things he said he was going to do. They didn't do any of his stupid shit with the wall or any of the other fucking, he didn't do anything that required legislation getting written and passed except for passing that fucking tax cut. Once that shit got done, they were done with Donald Trump. So it's like, Republicans don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck, Everything, all the shit that they say that they're going to do, they're not going to fucking do it, even if they get, I don't know. It's fucked up. And at least, Democrats are not, perfect and they're not better, but, we've already gotten more out of Joe Biden in 3 months. We've gotten more out of Joe Biden than we did in 4 years of Donald Trump. So there you go, folks. Anyway. Okay, I think we got to end this. I got to get going here. My hand is seriously hurting. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much. Thank you guys for joining me. I really, really appreciate that. Let me just go through my usual ending stuff because I have to do it. Because if I don't do it, then it's like, people don't like and subscribe me. Right? So, let me see here. You got to say it every time. Please like and subscribe. Really appreciate that. Oh, wait, I have to go to my SD shop, right? And I have to show off all my social media, my SD shop and stuff like that. Because if I don't do it, then people will not go to those things. So, anyway, thanks, guys, for all joining. Let me just show you my ending stuff here, and then I'm going to go ahead and end this. So this is my, here, let's start with my DeviantArt site. If you want to see more of my artwork, please see me on deviantart.com/Hawanja. I will put that down in the thing. You can see more of my artwork if you like it. I post webcomics, stuff like that kind of thing. And I do have a webcomic too. It's at hawanja.com. Fun for the whole stupid family. Let me just post that there. It has ninjas and demons and bad guys, and there's about to be a giant fight gonna happen here pretty soon. So I just updated this like the other day, like yesterday. Anyway, so that's my webcomic. This here is my SD shop. If you like what I do and you want to support me financially, please consider buying something. These are all prints that I make, and I make little sculptures too that I'm gonna put more up on there. Here's another example of what these little sculptures I have, because I've been making a lot of these recently. So, here's an example of what my little creatures look like. I made this. This is made out of latex, and these are little doll's eyes and stuff like that. And these tentacles, you can bend them around. So they're like little monster things. I'm gonna start putting these up on the SD shop too. Here's another one. I made this. It's like a weird little creature, kind of, stuff like that, little parasites. So these will be up here. I'm going to be putting these up over the weekend. So if you like what I do, please consider buying something. And did I put that in the... Yes, I did. And this is my other channel. This is UCD Videos, where I talk about toys and video games and movie reviews and stuff like that. And so if you want to see me talk about fun things that are not political, please check me out on UC Videos. Looks like a turd with tentacles, exactly. See, now you're getting it. That's exactly what it is. Like a real disgusting little pulsating, gross thing that you can fight your Spider-Man action figures or something. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog, and Dinah Cat Loves Me, of course. Good to see you. Cody Course, thank you so much for joining. And Scott Billiam, thank you for joining too. And Sean Nillabud, didn't see you there, man. Thank you. Thank you for joining. You guys are awesome. And I will see you all next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Everybody, have a good week. Adios.